No matter what method you're using for your waistband, whether it be a buttonhole finish or you've got hooks and eyes, you've got an invisible zip, you're ditch stitching, you're top stitching, doesn't really matter what kind of stitching you're doing. There's three main ingredients I think that are key to basically sewing the perfect waistband first time. Welcome back, my friends. If we're just meeting for the first time, welcome. My name is Evelyn Wood, and here on this channel we do everything vintage sewing skills to help our modern day sewing. And vintage sewing skills is learning about the individual skills, not just following a project start to finish and not knowing why. We always want to know the why. One of those things is waistbands. I mean, I'm sitting here with a half sewn skirt with waistband and all of my waistband samples here. I thought, let's talk about the three main ingredients that make up a waistband that let you sew it perfectly first time at least. Okay, so there are many different ways to finish a waistband. You can ditch stitch, top stitch, hand sew it. You can do button closure, hooks and eyes, it doesn't matter. The keys actually backtrack further than the finishing sewing techniques. Most of these backtrack to the beginning, and it's all about the beginning and the planning and knowing what you're doing ahead of time that makes all the difference in sewing your waistband. I think we've talked about this in videos here about sewing is 70% preparation. This is actually case in point. The first key ingredient is the structure. So a waistband needs to have structure to it. The idea is that it finishes your waistband. I'll be talking mostly on skirts, pants, waistbands, in that it gives structure, and you don't want it to stretch. It should hold its shape and form because it's in a high stress area. It's getting a lot of pressure on it. It needs to be structured, and that's how it needs to be to look good. You can imagine this here is just fabric. If I tried to make a waistband out of this, it's not going to hold itself up. It's going to crinkle when you bend over. It will just crunch down and it will look terrible. We need structure. So most modern patterns will tell you to use an iron-on interfacing, which is a great place to start. It's definitely the easiest place. There's all different types of sew-in interfacings and grosgrain ribbon techniques to use as well when you kind of go, I think, next level and look at going higher and higher in your skills level. But even a combination of all of these is really ideal. And the thing is, it always depends. It depends on the fabric, the type of garment that you're making, your skill level, of course, and what you have access to at the time. So there is no right way to do it. It always depends. And it will always give a different look. So this one here, I have used an iron-on interfacing thus far. And it's pretty good. You can see that's giving some nice kind of structure to that band, but it is still very, very flexible. Maybe that's what you like. Maybe you don't want it to be able to bend at all and you want some more structure. And this is where you could look at adding a grosgrain ribbon or I like the hair canvases a lot because they're very flexible. Adding a layer of this as well I can already feel the difference. That gives it just more structure. It wants to stay put upright by itself even more already. That's what you're looking for in a waistband. You need that structure. Now, natural structure can be obtained by cutting your waistbands always on the lengthwise grain, so along the warp threads. So that means down the selvage, have your grain line parallel to your selvages. So why? Anyone will know, if you know a little bit about your fabric, you'll know that the lengthwise grain is the strongest, most stable grain. It stretches the least. If you try and cut your waistband lengthwise, crosswise, you can, but it will have a bit more give and stretch, and it's not necessarily what you want in your waistband. So always cut your waistbands on your lengthwise grain to give yourself a natural structure as well. Of course, giving yourself the structure in your waistband not only obviously gives the look, the end look that you want, but it also helps with sewing because it's then really easy when you're trying to fold these over and press them straight and get everything looking sharp and crisp and do your ditch stitching. Because it's all structured and has the interfacing you know, already on the fabric, it makes it much easier to sew and to get those crisp lines and to get that smooth, crisp sewing. So it helps in many different aspects, not just the look of the finished product as well. So definitely experiment. I definitely encourage you to experiment and trial different methods of interfacing your waistbands. As I said, it depends on fabric, so try a few different things and you'll see. Just Google different applications. Sew-in applications have a bit different than iron-on, and grosgrain ribbons are a little bit different as well. So just experiment and play around, and I think you'll find it really fun, the world of waistband structure. At least I do anyway. Okay, notches. Oh, this one is so important. This is really my main key into sewing waistbands perfectly, is the notches. So I find most commercial patterns do not have nearly enough notches on the waistbands to really guide you into sewing it correctly. This is the eternal question, right? How do we sew a straight piece of fabric onto a curved piece of fabric? The answer is always notches. I have actually made other videos here on notches. If you're not sure how to mark them or want some extra tips, I'll link all these extra videos down below. Your pattern out of the box will probably only have maybe 1 or 2 notches along your waistband. I'm going to tell you, you need a lot more. This is how that when you start trying to sew this straight piece onto your curved section, you know exactly what points should match up where. Is because you have all of your notches marked along the way. So what you need to do is, I would suggest that you mark in every point of reference on your pattern onto your waistband. So a point of reference will be a side seam, for example. This is my center back seam here. I have a zip, and then this is my side seam, and this comes around to the center front of the skirt, and obviously that's repeated around, just so you know what you're looking at here. So for this particular skirt, I've made a point of reference as my side seam, the center front seam, and if this was still on a fold, I would still make a notch for the center front on the skirt and on the waistband. And if you happen to have any darts through any of here as well, that's definitely a point of reference that you would mark in. So how do you mark them in? Well, I can't go into too much detail here on how to start from start, but if you know how to measure your pattern and you know how to put stitch lines on your garments, all you need to do is measure along your stitch line. I've already drawn mine in. This is how I teach all of my students to make patterns and measure everything. Measure along the stitch line. I mean, you'd start from the center back, of course, here. You've got your center back notch, for example. This is the extension through here. And then you'd measure out to your side seam. Just walk your tape measure. This is called walking your tape measure. You know, I've got 18 through here. So then again, on my stitch line, I would measure out and mark in that same spot and create a notch. And keep going, measure all the pattern pieces. So learning how to measure patterns and the stitch line is so important. Now, all of my members of Vintage Sewing School, you know how to do this already. You have lessons in there, and I don't want to spoil the surprise, but all of these waistband samples I have and finishing techniques and all of this is all for you. It's coming on the 1st of February. So we are going really deep into waistband finishes and different techniques and a whole bunch of other stuff, but some waistband things are coming your way very soon. So just make sure you take a really good look at your pattern and note all of the points of reference and make those notches as best you can onto your waistband, because that is how, when you're pinning your waistband onto your garment, you can actually then pin and you get the right amount, like that curve piece now can fit onto your straight piece, and you know which parts to ease into where, and you won't end up with more skirt on this side and less skirt on this side and things just not matching upright and your darts uneven. And this is how you get that nice even flow and an even skirt, like garment to waistband. It's all eased in properly is by your notches. So with your waistband side up, yes. So did you know, I know some of you will already know that maybe you've already seen this happen in your sewing but didn't quite, you know, click and make it realize it's a thing. So when you sew a garment, the top layer is always going to be pushed a little bit more because of the foot and the pressure, and it will always be pushed more, and you're more likely to get on that top layer little extra bunches of fabric and a little bit more ease that you kind of have to deal with. So by putting your most structured, your most stable piece of fabric on top, it helps sandwich your two layers together, and because it's the most stable, it's going to push and ease the least amount, so it makes it easier to sew. If you're trying to do this on the flip side, you'll find this really hard because this top layer will just bunch and move if it's your garment piece. Even if you've got it stay stitched, it will still want to move more, and you know, I know you know, those little puckers and bunching, and you come to the seam and you're like, how did I end up with that extra little tuck of fabric? This will really help mitigate that problem, is by always sewing with your most structured piece on top. So whether it's on the straight grain, whether it's the interfaced piece, whatever it is, the most structured piece on top. This goes for any sewing, not just waistbands, any sewing at all. This will help fight that problem of that extra bubbly, puckery fabric. So I hope that tip you can apply to lots of different parts of your sewing. I've linked down below to a bunch of different videos that I think that you'll really enjoy and will actually complement all of this on what we've talked about here today. So do go check the description box below to watch those and carry on your sewing learning. So let me know, what do you think? Which one of these tips do you want to apply the most, is the most surprising? Or also tell us, what are your best tips to getting the perfectly sewn waistband? Remember to read those comments, because you all have the most amount of great information. The more we share is the more we all learn and improve our sewing skills. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, happy sewing. Bye.